They put him on that stage to humiliate him, but what followed silenced an entire auditorium. At Roosevelt Elementary, the kind of silence that fell over the auditorium was rare, heavy, expectant, and almost unbearable. 12-year-old Marcus Williams stood center stage, a lone figure beneath the glaring spotlight, his small hands clutching a microphone that had been deliberately set too high for him. 400 pairs of eyes bore down on him, but Marcus saw none of them. He was blind, born with congenital glaucoma. He had lost his sight at the age of 4. Yet in this moment, it wasn't his blindness that defined him, but the strength he held within it. From the third row, a sharp voice cut through the hush. "Go, Marcus, sing something rap." It was Tyler Brooks, class clown, self-appointed king of ridicule, drawing snickers from his friends. "Bet you know all the ghetto songs," he added with a cruel smirk. Sitting in the front row beside the school board, Principal Johnson forced a smile, one that barely masked her discomfort. She didn't step in. She didn't need to. Everyone knew what was really happening here. Marcus hadn't been invited to the school talent show out of admiration. It had been a setup. Just 3 days earlier, Tyler and his gang had overheard Marcus singing softly to himself behind the basketball court during recess. That moment of private joy became the seed of a joke, a prank, a public spectacle. "It'll be hilarious," Tyler had whispered to Madison Chun, the student council president. "Put the blind kid on stage. Let's see how bad it gets." Madison, with her sugary tone and overdone kindness, had approached Marcus with the invitation. But Marcus didn't need to see her face to know the truth. He heard it, the nervous tightness in her voice, the giggles just out of earshot, the subtle malice in what they thought was well hidden. What they didn't realize was that Marcus Williams wasn't an ordinary 12-year-old. He had learned to listen differently. Where others heard words, Marcus heard intentions. Instead of rejecting the offer, Marcus had smiled and accepted it. "It would be an honor," he had said calmly, his voice even and unfazed. "I have a special song I'd like to share." That simple response had unsettled Madison for a moment. Now, under the unforgiving lights, Marcus reached up and adjusted the microphone with smooth precision, the kind that could only come from practice, hours of it, packed into 3 intense days. But the real preparation had begun long ago, when life first taught him how to turn shame into fuel. At the back of the room, his grandmother, Dolores Williams, clutched the sides of her seat. She was the only one who knew the truth about Marcus' voice, how it wasn't just sound, but something spiritual, a gift passed down through generations of gospel singers. His mother, Sarah, had once lit up churches with her voice before complications during childbirth left Marcus blind. Music had been his anchor, his language, his armor. When Marcus could no longer see the world, he learned to feel it through vibrations, rhythms, and voices. By the time he was 6, he could recognize people just by how they breathed. By 8, he could hear the pain in a laugh or the lie in a compliment. And by 10, Marcus could hear a song once and recreate it with soulful nuance that moved people to tears. Despite the building tension in the room, Marcus stood calm, focused. The laughter, the whispers, the smug glances, they were white noise now. Tyler leaned forward, smug as ever. "Bet $5 he'll cry before he sings," he whispered. He had waited months to see this moment, to watch Marcus squirm. But Marcus was no longer behind the court, hiding. He was on the main stage, and he had come with purpose. "Quiet, everyone." Madison's voice cracked as she grabbed the auxiliary mic. "Let's give Marcus a chance." The forced pause in her words, "give him a chance," made it clear that no one expected anything more than a train wreck. Principal Johnson sighed and glanced at her watch, her boredom showing. She had allowed this performance to check a box for inclusivity, for image. She knew what Tyler's game was, and she didn't care enough to stop it. From the center of the stage, Marcus took one breath, a deep one, the kind of breath a person takes before everything changes. He tilted his head just slightly, listening to the way the air moved across the crowd. Then, with a voice so rich and soulful it seemed to rise from another world, he began to sing. The first note stopped time. Gasps rippled through the room. Parents straightened in their seats. Teachers sat up, stunned. Tyler Brooks' smug expression vanished, replaced by confusion and something else. Shame. The auditorium, once loud with mockery, had become a cathedral of stunned reverence. Because Marcus wasn't just singing. He was commanding the air, shaping silence into melody. His voice, pure, powerful, soaked in emotion, wrapped around the room and refused to let go. Dolores pressed a trembling hand to her heart. She knew this would happen. Marcus hadn't just inherited a voice. He had inherited grace. And now, every child who had mocked him, every adult who had dismissed him, every eye that had looked past him, was finally seeing who he was. If this story moved something inside you, if you've ever felt underestimated, unheard, or unseen, then don't forget to subscribe. Because what happened next turned one boy's moment of humiliation into a wave of transformation that would echo through every hallway of Roosevelt Elementary, and far, far beyond. She had seen this pattern too many times. Principal Johnson had watched countless well-meaning, inclusive gestures turn into subtle public shaming over her 15 years in education. The pattern was always the same. A student who was different being spotlighted, not celebrated, but exposed. This time it was Marcus. He stood beneath the hot glare of the auditorium lights, unmoved, the hush of the crowd stretching endlessly before him. Yet deep inside, Marcus was replaying one moment in his mind. His grandmother's voice the night before, trembling yet certain. "Son, they think your blindness is a weakness. They don't know it's your superpower. Tomorrow, you're going to show them something they'll never forget." That promise wasn't just spiritual, it was strategic. Over the last 3 days, Marcus had done something none of the students, teachers, or even Madison Chun had expected. He prepared, not just his voice or his posture, but a plan. He researched every person who would sit in that auditorium. From school board members to teachers, from students to parents. He knew their stories, their silent struggles, their hidden cracks. He knew which families were grieving, which kids were hiding their tears behind laughter, which parents were clinging to hope after layoffs or divorce. And he knew the darkest corners of those who sought to humiliate him. Tyler Brooks wasn't just a loudmouth bully. Behind the swagger was a boy crushed by a father who demanded perfection. Marcus had overheard enough to piece it together. Whispers in the hall, phone calls taken in corners. Tyler's father had spent thousands on private prep, pushing him toward a future he didn't believe in. "I promise I'll get in, Dad," Tyler had whispered once, voice breaking behind the lockers, unaware Marcus was just feet away. "I know I'm not good enough, but I'll do better. I swear." That wasn't a bully's voice. It was the sound of a boy drowning in expectations. And Madison Chun, the smiling orchestrator of Marcus' public debut, she carried her own burdens. Her immigrant parents worked 16-hour days to keep a modest restaurant alive. For Madison, success was survival. She wasn't just trying to get into a good college. She was trying to justify every sacrifice her parents had made. But somewhere along the way, Madison had decided that power was best protected by exclusion. Marcus had learned of her fabricated extracurriculars, her falsified letters of recommendation, and worst of all, how she had sabotaged fellow Asian students to reduce competition for minority scholarships. To her, the talent show wasn't just entertainment. It was control. But none of them, none, knew the full truth about Marcus Williams. He didn't just prepare to sing. He built a case. In his pocket was a small digital recorder, barely larger than a thumb drive. His grandmother had given it to him years ago after the first time a teacher refused to believe he'd been mocked during gym. "Document it," she said. "Truth protects the soul." That device had become his secret shield, and now his sword. For weeks, Marcus had recorded conversations, stored voices, collected words that revealed intentions. From whispered cruelty in locker rooms to offhand remarks laced with prejudice, Marcus had gathered an archive of evidence. Sound bites that painted the full picture of what was happening at Roosevelt Elementary. The microphone clicked into place. The final adjustment. The last moment before everything changed. The silence in the auditorium wasn't hopeful. It was hungry. The crowd wasn't waiting for brilliance. They were waiting for failure. But Marcus, he smiled. Not the smile of a scared child trying to please, but of someone who had already won. He moved his left hand to the exact point he had measured days earlier, where his voice would project perfectly. His right hand brushed the recorder in his pocket ready. The plan he'd executed over 72 quiet hours was unfolding now in real time. And no one, not Tyler, not Madison, not even the staff who turned blind eyes to injustice, would walk away unchanged. It all began Monday when Madison, in her syrupy tone, offered him the invitation. Marcus played along. "What kind of song should I sing?" he asked innocently, tilting his head like a child searching for approval. "Oh, you know," Madison replied, her voice gleefully ignorant. "Something authentic. Maybe something that represents your culture." The moment she said it, Marcus pressed record. One more thread for the tapestry. Over the next 3 days, Marcus conducted a quiet operation worthy of intelligence services. Every hallway became a source of data. Every lunchroom whisper a clue. With a memory for sound as sharp as any camera, he began collecting the truths that people only reveal when they think no one is listening. On Tuesday, crouched near the lockers during lunch, he heard Tyler crying, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm trying. I am trying." The words hit Marcus like a stone in water, rippling into the portrait of a boy cracking under pressure. He wasn't just a bully. He was collapsing under the weight of being not enough. Marcus didn't hate Tyler after that, but he understood him. Then came Wednesday. What Marcus overheard that day changed everything. In the locker room, Madison and Tyler were laughing, plotting. "We're going to record it," Tyler said. "Make it viral. Imagine how many likes we'll get. Blind little girl embarrasses herself at talent show." Marcus froze behind the door. Blind little girl. They didn't even know his gender. They didn't even care. To them, he was a spectacle. A joke with legs. A guaranteed like count. But Marcus was no joke. He was an architect of his own redemption. Now, on that stage, as the silence thickened and breaths were held, he prepared not to perform, but to reveal. He would sing, yes, but not for applause. He would sing to awaken, to confront, to show that his blindness had never limited him. It had freed him to see the truth others were too scared to face. And when his voice finally broke through the air, clear, resonant, woven with the weight of everything he had endured, there would be no laughter, only revelation. What came next would not just silence the room, it would expose the roots beneath it. Tyler had chuckled when he said it, his casual cruelty so sharp it made even Madison hesitate. "Tyler, isn't that a little too much?" she'd asked, faltering just slightly in her usual confidence. "Relax, Madison," Tyler had replied, brushing it off. "It's just humor. He shouldn't have agreed to do it if he can't handle the pressure." Every syllable of that exchange had been recorded, meticulously cataloged by Marcus with context, timestamps, and location. It was never just about catching them in a lie. It was about building a case so undeniable, so comprehensive, that even the most indifferent authority couldn't look away. But Marcus hadn't stopped at gathering dirt. On Wednesday evening, in the warm, book-filled kitchen of his modest home, he sat across from the one person he trusted more than anyone, his grandmother Dolores. At 72, Dolores Williams had lived through more than her share of silent battles. The kind you don't report, the kind you carry in your spine and your silence. But she never believed in simply enduring injustice. She believed in disarming it with excellence, dignity, and unshakable preparation. As she sorted the printed transcripts and organized audio files into folders by name and date, she looked at Marcus with pride and steel in her eyes. "My grandson," she said, softly but firmly, "you were born with something no one can take from you. Not just your voice, but your vision, the kind of vision that doesn't need eyes to see the truth." Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. What she told Marcus next would shift everything. Dolores had been documenting discriminatory incidents at Roosevelt Elementary for years, cases the administration had ignored, patterns the teachers refused to confront. And she had proof. "There's something you need to know about Principal Johnson," she said. "She's under investigation by the district. Mismanagement of funds, especially money meant for inclusion programs. If one more discriminatory event happens on her watch, especially if it's public, she could lose her job." Marcus processed this new information like a chess master seeing 10 moves ahead. Johnson wasn't just a negligent bystander. She was a weak link, vulnerable. And if she was compromised, everything protecting Tyler and Madison might come crumbling down. His plan was no longer just about confronting bullies. It was about exposing an entire structure that enabled them. On Thursday, during lunch, Marcus made his boldest move. Using the library staff phone and masking his identity, he contacted 3 local media outlets. One was a community news station that covered school events. The other 2 were popular blogs run by local activists. His message was simple but effective. A unique event is happening tonight at Roosevelt Elementary's talent show. You'll want to be there. It will speak volumes about inclusion, students, and how far we've come, or haven't. He didn't mention bullying. He didn't accuse. He simply created curiosity, the kind that guaranteed presence. And by the time the sun dipped below the horizon that Thursday evening, camera operators and reporters had quietly slipped into the back rows of the auditorium, unnoticed by the students, but very much focused. Throughout the day, Marcus observed Tyler and Madison like a strategist reviewing a failed enemy operation. Tyler, emboldened by false confidence, upped his cruelty. He accidentally tripped Marcus near the west entrance, sending his books sprawling into a cold puddle. "Oops, sorry, Marcus," he said, loud enough to draw attention. "You really ought to be more careful where you walk." Marcus said nothing. He simply collected his dripping books, eyes hidden behind his glasses, but mind calculating every second. Every insult was another brick in the wall he was building, one that would trap his enemies within it. Madison, meanwhile, had begun her campaign of fake concern. "I hope he's okay tonight," she said to a group of classmates during lunch, sipping her juice like innocence itself. Some people just don't understand when they're being included as an act of kindness. Marcus heard it. He heard it all. And he smiled. Not because he liked it, but because he knew the reckoning was near. Now, under the bright white lights of the Roosevelt Elementary auditorium, Marcus adjusted the microphone with a grace that came only from exact preparation. His every movement was measured, calm, practiced. His right hand subtly checked the recorder in his pocket. 3 days of audio, each more devastating than the last, were locked and ready. Tyler Brooks sat in the 3rd row, his legs stretched confidently, completely unaware that in a matter of minutes, the laughter he anticipated would twist into silence, and then into shame. Madison Chun, seated near the soundboard, organized her cue cards with rehearsed efficiency. Her attention focused outward, never suspecting the truth was already crashing down around her. Principal Johnson, sitting with her usual air of superficial professionalism, checked her watch again, eager to get through this obligatory moment of inclusivity. She had no idea that in the back rows, representatives from the very media outlets Marcus had called were already setting up discreet recording equipment, waiting. But even Marcus hadn't anticipated what would happen next. As he stood still at the center of the stage, his body calm, but his heartbeat a quiet drum roll in his ears, something began to shift. The air itself thickened, not with tension, but with expectation. It was as if the room had finally begun to sense that something extraordinary was about to occur. It wasn't just another student performance. It was the start of something bigger, a moment so real it would punch through the walls of cruelty and expose every cracked layer beneath. He adjusted the microphone one last time. Then his voice, clear, calm, and firm, pierced the silence like a blade. "Before I sing," he said, every syllable perfectly measured, "I'd like to share something special with all of you." A murmur moved across the room. Tyler sat up straight. This wasn't part of the prank. Something was off. Marcus continued, his face serene. "Over the past 3 days, since I was so kindly invited to this talent show," he let that word hang with subtle irony, "I've had the opportunity to learn a lot. Not just about myself. About all of you. About how some people view students like me." And with that, he reached into his pocket and held up the recorder. "Fortunately, I have an exceptional auditory memory, and I also have a habit of documenting interesting conversations." There it was. The silence. Not the silence of anticipation or mockery. This time, it was the silence of consequence. Tyler's smile faded. Madison's hands froze mid-flip of a note card. Principal Johnson's head turned slowly, eyes narrowing. But Marcus wasn't done. Not by far. The blood drained from Madison Chun's face. Her hands, which had moments ago confidently shuffled cue cards, now trembled visibly in her lap. Tyler Brooks made a sudden motion to stand, perhaps to run, to escape the explosion he had helped trigger, but his friends tugged him back into his seat. Even they understood that standing now, in the middle of this unraveling, would only confirm guilt. The trap had sprung shut, and no one was escaping unscathed. Marcus turned slowly toward the crowd, his posture unshaken, the small recorder still resting firmly in his palm. "Tyler Brooks," he said, voice clear and composed. Then he pressed play. Tyler's voice blared through the auditorium speakers, with chilling clarity. "Imagine how many likes we'll get with a blind little girl getting embarrassed." A collective gasp swept through the room, like a tidal wave. Murmurs of disbelief rippled across the rows of parents, teachers, and students. Some adults leaned forward in their seats. Others sat back, stunned into stillness. Eyes turned toward Tyler, whose face had gone ghostly pale. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but no words came. And Marcus wasn't finished. "And Madison Chun," Marcus continued, gaze steady, "our dedicated student council president." He tapped the recorder again. Another clip began to play. Madison's voice, unmistakably her own. "It's just humor. He shouldn't have accepted if he can't handle the pressure." Madison looked like she'd just been dropped into ice water. Her breath hitched. Her parents, sitting in the second row, stared at her, not with anger, but with a devastating mixture of disappointment and shame, a kind of parental heartbreak that no disciplinary letter could ever replicate. Her father leaned forward, jaw clenched. Her mother quietly turned away. Marcus waited. He didn't rush. He let the weight of every word settle over the crowd, like falling ash. But he wasn't done. "And now," Marcus said, his voice lowering slightly, sharpening, "Principal Johnson, the one who approved this entire presentation, who knew exactly what this was really about." He pressed play. This time, the voice was older, colder, professional. It was unmistakably Principal Johnson on a recorded phone call. "Let the boys have a little fun. At least it keeps them out of more serious trouble. And frankly, if the special boy can't handle a little fun, maybe he's not right for our school." The effect was immediate. The auditorium exploded in angry murmurs. Parents stood up, some shouting, some demanding answers. A few teachers exchanged wide-eyed glances. In the far back, the local reporters, who had quietly taken their seats at the start of the show, were now scribbling furiously into notepads, their lenses snapping photographs. The scandal Marcus had quietly set into motion was now blooming in full force, right in front of the entire school. But Marcus remained still. He raised his hand, and the crowd slowly quieted. "Wait," he said. "I'm not finished." With a smooth movement, he connected the recorder to the auditorium's main sound system. There was a brief hiss of static, then silence. Marcus stood alone on stage, his figure small against the towering velvet curtains behind him, but his presence was now impossible to ignore. He took one steadying breath. "Tyler," Marcus said calmly, "you once said I probably know all the ghetto songs." A few parents visibly flinched at the word. "Well, here's one I've learned recently." Then he began to sing. The first note of Amazing Grace floated into the air, soft, haunting, and unlike anything the audience expected. This was no simple rendition. It was a jazz interpretation, each note layered with harmonic complexity, technical finesse, and emotional precision that made time itself feel like it had slowed. Marcus didn't just sing. He commanded. His voice, shaped by years of hidden practice and gospel lineage, filled every inch of the space, every corner of every heart. He bent notes like silk, soared into falsetto like a seasoned artist, and dropped into deep, resonant lows that sent shivers through the audience. It wasn't just flawless, it was revelatory. Eyes widened. Tears welled. Some hands went instinctively to hearts. The performance was surgical in its skill and utterly devastating in its emotional power. Every note was proof, not just of talent, but of genius. Every modulation declared, "You didn't see me before, but you will now." When the final note drifted into silence, there was a beat, a long, suspended pause, where no one moved, no one dared to breathe. Then, a single pair of hands began to clap. Another followed, and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium had erupted into a standing ovation, the sound deafening, sustained, and pure. It went on for 5 full minutes. No one asked them to stop. No one wanted to. In the third row, Tyler Brooks sat motionless, his face buried in his hands. He wasn't crying from humiliation. He was crying because, for the first time in his life, he saw the mirror and didn't like what looked back. The joke he had crafted had become a spotlight, not on Marcus, but on himself. At the sound table, Madison Chun stared ahead in silence, her shoulders shaking as tears slipped down her cheeks. Her parents had yet to look at her again. And Principal Johnson? She had stopped checking her watch. Now she was checking her career, what was left of it. Marcus stood there quietly, arms by his side, his face serene. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. He simply took it all in. The applause, the awakening, the truth rising in the room like a tide. He hadn't just reclaimed his dignity. He had shattered the illusion that allowed others to pretend he never had it to begin with. Because this wasn't just about a performance. It was a reckoning. And every single person in that room knew it. Madison Chun sat frozen in her chair, her face buried in her hands, the weight of shame crashing down on her like a tidal wave. She finally understood that she had crossed a moral boundary that could never be reversed. But Marcus wasn't done, not yet. His voice, now calm yet commanding, rose with a force that demanded attention from students and adults alike. "Principal Johnson," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering, "I would like to inform you that copies of these recordings have already been sent to the district superintendent, the Parent-Teacher Association, and 3 local media outlets who are in attendance tonight." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Principal Johnson, trying to rise to her feet, felt her knees betray her. She sank back into her seat, her career already crumbling before the final blow had even landed. Marcus continued, his voice unwavering. "I have also uncovered documented evidence of misappropriated funds, money meant to support inclusion programs for students like me. Instead, it was redirected to administrative office renovations and performance bonuses for select employees." The revelation landed like an explosion in the auditorium. School board members exchanged panicked whispers, their expressions twisted in disbelief. This was no longer about bullying or a talent show gone wrong. This was about corruption at the highest levels of school leadership. Marcus returned the microphone to the stand with the same poise he had maintained throughout, then took a long breath. "The real tragedy," he said quietly, "is not that they tried to humiliate me. It's that they missed an opportunity to celebrate genuine talent because they were too busy protecting their own prejudice." As he turned to exit the stage, he paused, looking back at the audience one final time. "To every student who's ever felt different, excluded, or underestimated, your voice matters. Your talent is real. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." The auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. Parents rushed forward to meet Marcus, reporters scrambled to get quotes, and students looked on in awe. But amidst the rising celebration, 3 figures sat motionless: Tyler Brooks, Madison Chun, and Principal Johnson, each confronting the irreversible consequences of their cruelty and arrogance. Yet even they couldn't foresee what would come next. That night didn't just expose injustice, it sparked a revolution. Marcus recordings didn't just destroy reputations, they ignited a full-scale investigation into systemic discrimination that went far beyond Roosevelt Elementary. Within weeks, a wave of whistleblowers came forward. 6 months later, the district's education system looked nothing like it had before. Marcus Williams, the boy they had underestimated, now sat in one of the city's most prestigious recording studios, putting the finishing touches on his debut album. The same hands Tyler once mocked now composed melodies that resonated with listeners across the country. But Marcus hadn't stopped at music. The investigation his courage had triggered had swept through the school district like wildfire. Principal Johnson didn't just lose her job. She faced formal charges of financial misconduct and institutional discrimination. Her denials fell apart when more recordings surfaced, including statements from other students emboldened by Marcus' bravery. Her once powerful image was now shattered beyond repair. Tyler Brooks found himself thrust into an unwanted spotlight. A viral video capturing his cruel taunts and Marcus' stunning performance turned him into a national cautionary tale about privilege and bullying. Universities rescinded admission offers. His father, a decorated military officer, was forced into early retirement amid the backlash. Tyler spent the next several months in a behavioral rehabilitation center, confronting for the first time the weight of accountability. They tried to break me because they thought I was fragile, but they found out I'm indestructible. True strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from turning every fall into a launch pad. But Marcus' legacy didn't stop there. He launched a foundation that provided free musical instruments and lessons to underprivileged children. His debut single, Unsilenced Voice, raised enough funds to revitalize music programs in 50 schools. His mission wasn't just to inspire. It was to uplift, protect, and empower the voices others had tried to erase. The most powerful lesson of Marcus' journey was never about revenge. It was about transformation, about how one brave student, armed with truth, talent, and unshakable resolve, could trigger a wave of change that protected thousands. Today, Marcus performs in sold-out arenas across the globe. But at every show, there's a moment when the lights dim, and he addresses the audience directly. "This one is for every Tyler, every Madison, every Principal Johnson," he says. "Thank you for giving us the motivation to prove just how wrong you were about our potential." And with that, Marcus plays the first notes of a song that doesn't just entertain. It heals. It empowers. It reminds us that the strongest voices are the ones that rise after being told to stay silent.